Hi, my name's Dee and welcome to Sunchild Tarot. And of course, having a look at the eclipse, I have with me astrologer David Fischer. So David, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Darren. How are you? Dee?
I'm good. Are you excited about the eclipse, or are you trepidatious, or how do you feel about it in general?
Well, it's kind of hard to say how I feel about it because there are some good qualities in the chart that we're going to look at, such as the Jupiter Spirit square. Venus is in Cancer now, which is the moon sign. So there are some sweet spots to it, but well, it's still a solar eclipse and it's still happening with the Mercury cazimi. So we are at retrograde. So we are going to see some disruptions happening in our routines and things that we were expecting and stuff like that. So it's a mixed bag, really.
I must admit, from what I've been looking at so far, I've been, as we discussed last night, trepidatious, I think would be a good word. You know, it's really pumped for the lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse seemed beautiful. It was clearing things out. It was bringing things to the surface. This one, what I've seen so far seems to be, oh, now you've got all your stuff sorted out. Here's a new box.
Yeah, here's a new box. Yeah, let me just put up the screen so you can take a look at the animated page. Here you go. So this is a chart for where I live. This is São Paulo, Brazil. And we will have the eclipse happening here very early in the morning, as you can see. This is at 19 degrees of Gemini, and you have Mercury diving into a conjunction with the Sun by less than a degree. So it's already in what some would consider cazimi, the condition called cazimi, or being at the heart of the Sun. So this particular condition, can you hear me, Dee?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I thought I lost you for a moment. But so this condition of being at the heart of the Sun, it enhances a determined planet. It makes it louder. It makes it express in whatever the Sun is putting out there. And the Sun is the focus of the person. So for a moment there, you have some clarity. You have an insight. You have an aha moment that allows you to proceed in a different fashion than you had previously. Why would it be proceeding in a different fashion? Because this is represented by a new moon. Is the beginning again of a lunar cycle. It's a solar eclipse, which means it's not just a new beginning, but it's a moment of letting go of previous. We all begin and end things all the time in our lives, but there are some moments where we have to let go of the modus operandi that we use to do things, and we need to reshape the way we understand even our personalities and what we are aiming to get to. So it's not just any adaptation, it's not just any letting go so I can improve this or that. It's a whole new this or that. It's as you said, the presentation of a new set of circumstances that will follow us through the next few years. You have to look at what chart. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just wondering, when you say about cazimi and that's amplifying, you know, like the being in the heart of the Sun means the Sun is amplifying Mercury, or that the Sun's energies are have that mercurial quality to them.
Yeah.
Yet the eclipse is the Sun being blacked out.
Yes.
So does that mean extra Mercury, or does that mean no Mercury and Sun for the 5 hours? Or does it mean extra Mercury, blank bit, extra Mercury?
Well, what it means is that when you have that planet in that condition of being in the heart of the Sun, if the Sun is being blacked out by an eclipse, as you're saying, it means the circumstances are going to be presented to us with a mercurial twist. Mercury is going to be involved in whatever is blacking out the Sun, in whatever is making us go, haywire in our consciousness and oh my God, I need to do this right now. I need to take action with this right now. And this is going to have a mercurial twist. It's going to have a mercurial face, whatever house that falls in your chart.
Right.
So if, for example, it's the 10th house, if you're a Virgo rising or anything like that, you have your midheaven in Gemini, you would have your career being affected by these changes. You'd have your career being affected by mercurial circumstances. You could be writing something new for someone else. You could have a new gig being presented to you that's just what you wanted, but it wasn't in your plans, and you were doing this whole other thing, and then you see yourself facing this choice to go another direction. And things that are very mercurial. You can expect to see these blackout moments of your previous plans, of your previous focuses, which is a solar word, focus. Whatever you were focusing on earlier is going to be eclipsed by mercurial circumstances, and you're going to be presented with new tools, with new upgrades, with new information. That's going to probably throw in a whole new direction that you didn't even expect.
So we've got all that going on, but Mercury is still square, and therefore the eclipse is still square to Neptune. I know that the square is reducing, but it's still within orb. Mercury square Neptune is a lot of misunderstandings, is it not?
Yes, but there is something to be said that these two eclipses are happening in the later part of these signs. These are mutable signs, and we have been having activity in them for quite a while now. We had a Venus last year retrograde in Gemini. We've been having a lot of action in these houses. So these Neptune squares, especially with this eclipse, I think they're just a continuation of a waking up process of actually coming clear into what has been confusing us. What is the elephant in the room that no one has addressed in the past few decades that we have been trying to sort out since Neptune ingressed into Pisces? What is this thing that has been causing so much havoc in society that we cannot name, which is a mercurial word? Well, these circumstances perhaps will bring to light through these uncertain scenarios what exactly has been blocking our consciousness from fully grasping the situation that we are in and taking the necessary action, the confident action to go forward, to move forward. And I say that we are going to have a bit more clarity with it, even though it's a square, for two reasons. You have Mercury being domiciled, even though it's retrograde, and being at the heart of the sun, which is an enhancing quality to Mercury. So it's probably going to throw a spotlight, even though this is a darkening out of things, even though this is a blacking out moment. This blacking out moment forces your consciousness to look at something directly once the lights are back on. You cannot unsee, you cannot change what has happened to throw your perspective to what it was before.
So we can trust the insights that this eclipse brings. They're not going to be distorted. It's more highlighting where the falsehoods have been.
Yes, and the third reason that I didn't mention, because it was a surprise reason, I forgot to mention, it was that Jupiter is also domiciled and stationing retrograde. I know that this is not an enhancing condition necessarily to a planet being retrograde or stationing in one sense of the word, but it is enhancing in another that speaks to the level of consciousness that planet requires you, the conscious effort that the planet is requiring you to make in order to achieve something in that area. But with Jupiter being domiciled, this amount of effort that you have to make to bring to consciousness what has been bothering you in this station while Jupiter is at its brightest in the sky, is getting closer and closer to Earth as it stations retrograde. So its significations are screaming to us, notice me, look at me. You need to figure out this bit here because it's an important omen for you. This is what Jupiter is saying in that area of your chart. So combine that with whatever Mercury square Neptune hasn't been able to name so far, and you have a new narrative coming up, popping up in your head of, oh, so that's why I could move forward before. Oh, now I have a new tool that I didn't have previously when I was feeling confused. And now I know that I don't have to be afraid of it anymore because the circumstances have changed. And so you own up, you take up this new empowered vision about the scenario, and you're able to move forward. Not quite immediately, obviously, because Mercury is still retrograde. So we are going to have this insight moment. But as soon as Jupiter, I feel, as soon as Jupiter starts moving backwards and Mercury starts moving forward, we are going to be, okay, now I see where I have to rearrange my plan. And now I see where I have been going wrong all this time, finally. So it's a closing chapter. It's going to the closing chapter of these eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. So whatever has been happening in the pair of houses that have been affected by these eclipses will be coming to a close. So now it's, concluding chapters. You wouldn't expect to be completely starting something out of the blue, completely new. It's about the plans that have been developing in circumstances that haven't been developing since early last year.
That's really interesting because two things. As you know, I was discussing with you about the symbols last night, and for those authors that have looked into this degree natally, there was this constant risk of an abuse of power, gaining power and it being abused, gaining power and then everything being torn away, or it being abused, falling over your own ego. And interestingly as well, the readings that I haven't filmed all of them, not by a long shot, but the readings that I've done so far for this eclipse, the vast majority of them seem to have been about setting something right, having seen an injustice, and trying your best to set it right. And interestingly, it's not always been an injustice that you yourself have created. For one sign, it did imply that this is your mess up and now it's time to tidy up your nonsense. But for another sign, it was more, you have seen this injustice happen and there is guilt present, not because you were necessarily responsible for the injustice, but because you weren't able to help, assist, ameliorate the effects, whatever. But here is coming the insight to jump in.
I'll help you get it right. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So and that's great because that's perfect, because this speaks loads to the fact that Jupiter is still going to have to spend some time in Aquarius with Saturn dealing with some things. So now that's stationing retrograde in Pisces, we are able to have that deeper insight that's more optimistic about setting these paths right. And whereas we had previously bulldozed through, because we needed to get to some specific result for an emergency, because we are in an urgency of getting there. But now that Jupiter is in Pisces and things feel a little bit lighter, not that they are perfect by a long shot, not by a long shot, as you said, but the thing is that you have to look at it a little more lightly in order to proceed confidently in whatever project you're putting forward, in whatever house that falls in your chart. So yeah, setting the path straight, the record straight, with Jupiter moving back into Aquarius later in the year, but enjoying this moment, this particular moment of the eclipse, to name those things that you want to change from the previous months, to sit down, organize the data that you've collected for the past few weeks, and knowing how you're going to proceed confidently in your project.
So would you say this could go, the insights that get delivered could go so far as saying, as dispelling illusions that have been hanging around, or are they simply an awareness of, hang on a minute, that's an illusion, that's not real?
It's both. You are going to come into consciousness of things that have been an illusion for the past few months, but you're going to realize that they haven't been that much of an impediment, and you're going to say, oh, good thing that they weren't so bad, that they are fixable, because now I can improve from this situation. Now I can grow from it and understand better how to identify these illusions, how to not fall prey to my own antagonistic, kind of feelings about reality, of being a victim to reality, but rather you own up the things that you can do about whatever you're unhappy about, and you realize where you have been stopping yourself from changing to that more favorable direction, and you're going to start wanting to move into that more favorable direction from now on. But you're still going to have to work to undo some of the messes that you've gotten yourself into in the past few months, if you have. If not, you're just going to proceed, with more clarity ahead, and that's not going to be particularly challenging for you if it doesn't fall in any particular angle of your chart or in any particular important planet that's being activated as a Lord of the Year or anything. It's just going to be another factor in a already developing story that's not going to be, that huge necessarily, but it's going to change your perspective much in this manner.
Now, I would wager a guess that from what you were saying, there is not only that awareness, but there is a potential of a hunger to deal with all of this stuff, because although the North Node in this eclipse is 9 degrees away, it is parallel the moon by less than 2 degrees. So is that implying that there would be some form of emotional hunger after these revelations of going, yeah, that needs sorting?
I don't use parallels usually, but what I can say about the fact that you're having a lunar eclipse, and in regards to your question, is that when you're talking about the luminaries, you're talking about your conscious focus, everything that your body, your senses can perceive around you, and what you choose to focus within that realm of possibilities of everything that you're capable of perceiving with your senses. So there is, and they talk about our spirit, and the North Node is about that hunger that we have for immortality. Remember that Rahu was that demon that drank the elixir of eternal life, and it speaks to the nature of the human being, of always trying to have everything under control so that we can thrive within our spirit all the time. It's a demonic influence, because there's no such thing within this earthly existence. So there's no such achievement. You can't reach that. So it's mostly a demonic influence that might make you go a little obsessive with your desires and with the things that you are spiritually inclined to achieve. So yes, it can give us a little bit of this, I need to do this kind of quality, but that's true of a lot of eclipses in general. The parallel might add to it.
Yes, because I've just suddenly thought there's the age-old symbols of the sun representing the leader and the moon representing the people, and the people are eclipsing the leader, if you're looking at those symbolisms here, with a hunger of actually doing something. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a few more social movements arise, or existing ones gain more strength, gain more momentum.
Yeah, I think that the existing ones that were not based on true purposes, like they were using some words to describe one kind of purpose, but that was just so they could get to a determined position, so they could exert another type of endeavor, so they could do another type of thing. This is not going to sustain itself. These kinds of narratives where you have second intentions behind everything you do are not going to sustain themselves in this eclipse, because it's going to be too apparent. Whoever is close enough to their goal with malicious intent with that malicious intent is going to shine through the person's face. It's going to be obvious to everyone around them, and the shadow is not going to be able to hide anymore, because the circumstances around it are not going to allow the person to hide their own purposes behind their actions anymore. So what was I going with that? I forgot where I was.
Well, we were talking about social movement. So in a way, purely intended social movements get a plus, and ones that where someone are using it for an agenda, for a secondary purpose, secondary gain, secret agenda, what have you, are likely to fall out of favor.
They're definitely going to have, yes, definitely going to have pushback. Doesn't mean, depending on the determined charts of the countries and people involved, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to get to their goal. Personally, if you're doing something in your personal life and you're just, another normal bloke in somewhere in the world, you're probably going to do well, if you're being honest with your intents right now, because but if you are one of these people that are conferred a lot of power, you might just force your way through, even though it's clear that what you're doing is disgusting or is immoral or is unlawful. You still might get away with it, but it's going to be shown for everyone to see. Everyone is going to name it as it is, from their perspective. So it's not going to be easy to follow through with any sketchy intent, with any devious intent.
We've had a beautiful example of this already in Britain over the last couple of weeks, where an advisor of Boris Johnson, who was then kicked out of the cabinet, has gone and testified in front of a select committee and basically put the boot into Boris. And everybody's going, well, we believe every word he says, but we can also quite clearly see why he's doing it, and it's political revenge.
Yes, this is quite interesting to what's happening here in Brazil as well, because we have a situation at this moment where people are divided between having to vote for a previous president, an ex-president, to come back into power after having all these scandals around corruption in his government, or voting for someone who's currently in power, killing a lot of the population, killing off a lot of the population. So we are between a rock and a hard place, and we can see the bigoted intentions behind all the campaign that the politicians that are against the current government, we can see all of their tricks or whatever they're doing, and we see clearly the politics now. But this is the thing. Now we are being faced here in Brazil with the choice to act differently than what we have in the past decades, in face of this new realization of, wow, we have been in the old politics since 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and we have not changed. We need to do something now. The younger generation needs to step up and take some action. I say the younger generation because Jupiter is very jovial, and Mercury, in the circumstances that are going to affect us for the next years, is very central to this eclipse. And Mercury represents younger people, students, and researchers, people that are trying to, bring awareness about things. The media. All of this is going to get reshaped in the next few years, because we are going to see the necessity for focusing our attention as a collective in things that are really important, things like, scientific research, something that the current government here in Brazil, for example, is dismantling. I think we are going to see a change in course of that in the next few years, for the better, I hope. And I think
the same image is occurring in Israel at the moment, with a new government being formed by a party that's even more right-wing than the Likud, in coalition with a real centre moderate party. And then last night, I read this morning, no, tell a lie, I was told this morning, Netanyahu publicly announced that it was all a fix, it's all nonsense, and he pulled a Trump saying that the election was fixed and it's all nonsense. So again, there's that transparency of agenda.
And you see how all of these, you see how all of these agendas, all of these speeches have been pulled off in the past few months by Trump, largely last year, while the eclipses were raging in the beginning of the cycle, right? That's when we got all these narratives popping up to protect whatever dogma we had in society previously. They were advertising for it, saying, here we are, this is our truth, we are going to make America great again, and all that thing and all that shit. And that all fell short because the circumstances were so incredibly against those who were speaking those nonsenses, basically, that now they're still repeating these speeches, they're still talking about it, they're still trying to pull off these moves, but we can see it more clearly. We are not paying attention to it as much. We are leaving it behind, and thus, with them, these politics, these old politic ways of trying to sweep your shit to under the rug, it's not going to work anymore. You can't pull that off anymore.
So since we're on the topic of government and governments and politics, Saturn's pretty much trying the North Node at the moment. What effect is going on there?
Well, it's trying to the whole position, saying that we are being able to conceive of new ways of structuring the naming of things. It's like, I used to think that this particular facet of society didn't speak to me in any level. But now, at the current circumstances, I am capable of fully integrating how the current political scenario, this whole social thing, speaks to me. And we're all having to do this reevaluation right now because of the COVID thing, because of what we all have been through during this specific period of time. Now with this eclipse, we are finally feeling more motivated and relieved that we can trust the image that we have created for ourselves, the names that we are giving to the things that we have been going through, the naming of the abuses that we have suffered, for example, and all of these things. They are more provided, they are more, they're easier to do with this trine from Saturn. It becomes easier to see where the flaw is and to tackle it, basically.
Now, looking at the chart and working my way around, the next stop we have is Pluto. Now, do you use quincunxes? Because as I understand it, there's a misunderstanding with the quincunx. And so is it that the luminaries are not understanding what's ending, or Pluto's there in Capricorn going, I give up, I haven't got a clue what they're doing?
Well, to me, it speaks to the fact that the circumstances it's an immutable sign in relation to Pluto and Capricorn. Pluto and Capricorn is speaking to the whole change of dynamic in politics that we have been seeing for the past decade. And we're still going to continue to see until it moves into Aquarius and things get much more dynamic. But until now,
I don't think the changes we've seen in politics in the last decade have been all that positive at all. Certainly not for the politics of power.
Yeah, but
people
remember in the French Revolution and in the American Revolution, when you had all those powers initially with Pluto and Capricorn being raised, the conservative powers being raised, wars happening so they could so to decide who kept control of what. And that's basically what we are seeing now. Someone is always going to be in control of something. You know, there's always going to be someone in power. There's always going to be someone on top. So, or some organization and things like that. So Pluto in Capricorn is just redefining what is the sense of power of a nation or of a society. Who's the center of power? Why are they the center of power? What interests does that center of power protect? And is that interesting? Is that interesting to a majority? How is that happening? Now, we have been seeing with, allowing same-sex marriages in a lot of countries in the past decade, more religious acceptance throughout the globalized society. Of course, we're talking about a very, we're talking about a portion of society here. Not everyone has access to internet, not everyone has access to television or anything or something like that. But we are talking about the society that everyone that has access to this video is probably living in right now, everything has changed within politics in the past decade in a very fundamental way. All the morals have been redefined. All the religious institutions have been redefined in their purpose and in their importance and all of that in a very significant way. We might not see how those changes are effectively reshaping our society at the moment, because we still haven't had the time to act so much on the changes of perspective and circumstances that were brought to us by technology and all of the things.
I'm interested in the way that you've said that there will always be someone in power, there will always be someone on top, whereas there's certainly, and I suppose cancel culture is the most extreme example of this. Would you say there's enough to back up a shift from people focusing on who is on top to who is responsible?
Yes, who is responsible. That's one thing that you can expect when Saturn is going through its signs, is that people are going to be very legalists. I don't know how to say that, but they're going to be pointing to other people like the devil. Like the devil is accusing you of doing something, and Jesus is supposed to be the one defending you in front of the divine unity. You have now Pluto and Saturn doing this job of, okay, so whoever is responsible for the bad things that are going on, we are going to accuse them, and we are going to point fingers to other things. But you see, this dynamic it's a double-edged sword, because it works for people who are in power and for people who hold the ability to determine what are the laws that we are going to establish now. These people are going to point their fingers to others, and they're going to say, they are doing this and this is wrong. But at the same time, they have their own interests, to point their fingers and to deflect attention from whatever they're doing in order to throw attention to whatever their enemy is doing, in a bad manner, so that they can keep doing what they're doing. So, but yeah, this devil's advocate pointing out who's to blame and the minutiae of the law and who's really going to take all the blame for it, and we need to find a culprit. All of this is very Saturnian, yes.
So there's a lot of a risk of othering, which we've seen othering for the past 10 years. As I was saying, that shift in politics. Mm-hmm. It's the immigrant coming for your jobs, yes, or the asylum seeker coming for your food.
It's not coincidence that we are coming into a climax of all of that for the past decade. Well, Pluto has been in Capricorn. It's not a coincidence that we're having the climax of all of that, of all the migrant crisis, of all the labor camps built in the US for the concentration camps built in the US for the immigrants and stuff like that. This othering quality is what I'm talking about, that you have been saying, and it's coming to a climax while Saturn is home, while Saturn is in Capricorn and Aquarius, showing us the consequences of this othering, showing us the consequences of these politics that seek to segregate people for political gain. The thing that I was saying about people being clear about their intentions, about others' true intentions, and not only their speech, their discourse, is because of that, because we've come to this place in time where it's impossible to not be anything except for what you truly are, and people are not going to see anything less.
I'm hoping this is meaning some good news for, because it's not just the camps on the border for America. You've got the Uyghurs in China, who over the last year or so have finally got back into the news again, but they have been suffering for like 20 years plus. So, I mean, it's such a huge issue that there's, it's nice to see that the world is sort of paying attention, but with all this other more internal dramas, because there's talking about internal dramas that spell out and affect the world, America's got its Pluto return coming up, hasn't it? So, and this is the first time we get to sit and watch one. So I liked your drawing up to the comparison to the French Revolution, and you said the original American Revolution, but like you say, it's a double-edged sword. It could go either way.
Who took power over in France during the last revolution? Who took power in the United States during the American Revolution? It was an elite. It was people who held resources. They had a means to do that, and they just wanted to enforce their own politics. And so they redefined for the public what was right, what was proper, what was necessary for them to do in order for them to be free again. Because they weren't considered to be, they didn't consider themselves to be free, and they weren't. They still aren't in a lot of ways. But the thing is, we are doing the same thing now in different circumstances than our forefathers, but we're doing the same thing now. It's no different.
So I'm looking at your chart there, and I appreciate that the ascendant and the point of fortune are geographically based, but nevertheless, unless you're looking at asteroids, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, empty. What are we missing? What does that concentration all on pretty much one half of the zodiac imply for us? You know, what are we top heavy with?
Well, the empty signs just refer you back to their rulers and what their rulers are doing. So if you have Virgo, Leo, and Libra in that concentration there in Gemini and Cancer, that just means we are focusing on whatever the rulers of those signs are doing. So the circumstances that we are describing now, they just mean that those signs and whatever they mean in your chart is focused on that area as well, and depending on that area to move forward in their circumstances, in their particular circumstances. So if you have your fourth house, for example, ruled by Leo, and you have the sun going through your second, it might be that you're looking for things related to your finances, that a lot of things are happening related to your finances that are putting a lot of your fourth house messes on hold, or that are, for example, I'm depending on this new job, I'm depending on this raise, so I can do this fourth house thing, so I can relocate, so I can renovate my house, so I can do, you know, things like that.
So that would be Aries rising you're on about there, wouldn't it?
No, that would be actually Taurus rising.
Taurus, right? Oh yeah, I'm misreading it. Okay, so let's, on that note then, let's bring it back into the more personal perspective rather than the global. I mean, okay, the world's going to erupt. So, but on a more personal level,
before we go to a more personal level, I wanted to say something about the quincunx that I didn't get to mention previously. That because I was going to mention that with all that politics going on in Pluto, in the Pluto side of the chart, it's a whole story that's circumstantial and generational. It's a whole thing. The Gemini eclipse being in a quincunx to it, I consider it to be an inversion, and I see in which derivative house in relation to the eclipse is Pluto falling in. So Pluto is in the 8th house in relation to Gemini.
Yeah.
Right. So Pluto being in the 8th house in relationship to Gemini means that whatever is happening in that area of the eclipse is happening because of the dynamic circumstantial shift in that 8th house topical scenario. Things that we generally don't want to think about: death, taxes, governmental expenses and things like that, that, you know, the general public doesn't generally have to deal with, that are threatening our day-to-day circumstances, our day-to-day life. The politics have been hell for the last few years, making it impossible for anything to be named in Gemini. So you're trying to do some Gemini thing here of constructing a determined narrative, so we can have a determined set of politics, public politics. We are trying to determine some public politics here and how to go about it. Well, we can't do that because the 8th house, that was supposed to be things that we don't need to look at all the time, that were supposed to be okay, that were supposed to be taken care of, has Pluto in it. So everything has been being destroyed for all these past few years. And now we have an eclipse happening here because we need to have this focus, focus being brought to this part of the chart in order to solve much of what's going on in that 8th house as well.
Am I right in remembering another association of the 8th house is secret things?
Oh yes, the whole problem of corruption in the political system, not only here in Brazil, is countries spying on each other.
Well, I'm going in a different direction. We would be remiss if we did not mention that this is the month that the report on unidentified aerial phenomena is being presented to Congress. And all of a sudden, the mainstream media is UFO crazy. So we have this carrot dangled in front of some people for, oh, this is the month disclosure happens. Mm-hmm. So there's also obviously a huge section of the UFO community going, hang on a minute, why now? What are they trying to do? What are they making us not look at? What nonsense are they going to say so that they're just keeping everybody happy? Mm-hmm. And that strikes me as quite an 8th house things being destroyed, because it's almost like that constant refusal. They're not real, they're not real, they're not real. Oh, by the way, here's our several thousand hours of footage of them. You know, mm-hmm. And that secrecy itself has been destroyed by Pluto there.
Well, yes, there's that more direct interpretation, but something that you said that I find interesting to apply also to this dynamic is that you have people being much more aware of the delusion, of the illusion. Yeah. Being like, oh, they have been saying all this time that we shouldn't look in this direction, and now they suddenly want us to look in this direction. First of all, that proves that when you want us to look at something else so we don't see the shit that you're doing in the backstage, you know how to do it very well. And you did that with this very topic that you're bringing up now as a smoke curtain so we don't see the other thing. So we can neither credit this thing that you're saying right now, nor the things that you said previously, and therefore we have to question everything that you're saying now, and we have to look at the things that you're not saying, which is very Saturnian. Remember, paying attention to the things unsaid, to the things that people generally don't like to pay attention to, the ignored bit. That's Saturn, and it's reminding us, telling us, pay attention to the things that people don't want you to pay attention to. Call out the problems that people don't want you to call out, because it's by doing so that you're going to be able to develop a strong basis for moving forward. When Saturn is not domiciled, when you don't have planets in Capricorn and Aquarius, you generally don't have to do that all the time, even though you have to keep it in mind, whatever Saturn is transiting. But now with those planets there, you're obligated to do that, to pay attention to what people are not telling you, because that's where the juice is. Yeah. That's where the demons are hiding.
Right. So let's bring it back down to a more personal level. Who, as in terms of rising signs, for example, who's going to benefit the most, and who's going to have their world shook the most by this eclipse? And they're not necessarily different things either, are they?
No, not necessarily. Well, I think who's going to benefit the most are going to be cardinal angles, because after this eclipse, the cardinal angles which have the, let me see something here. Yeah, they will be happening in the 12th, 6th, or 3rd and 9th, the eclipses. So
Yeah.
they wouldn't be that prominent in angles for you unless you have planets around the eclipse degrees. And even so, it would have to be if those planets ruled angles or were activated as Time Lords. Otherwise, it's just going to be some shift in circumstances, but it's not going to be that particularly, huge for you. But cardinal angles are probably going to benefit the most because they have Jupiter being a little favorable for them, but Venus is favoring them a lot right now. And Mars is about to move out of Cancer, and so they are about to feel with the eclipse probably an uplift in their spirits, probably a lifting up of harsh circumstances they have been facing with the Mars in Cancer for the past couple of months. So there's that. The sign that you want, the signs that you're going to have a lot of benefit as well are the mutable signs, even though the eclipse is happening there, and for them, they're going to experience the most shifty circumstances, the most changeable circumstances. Since they are going to be the ones facing that, there's going to be less of a picnic, but it's still going to be more favorable in the long run because of the position of Mercury and Jupiter. The fixed signs, to be honest, they're not going to be, they're about to get that T-square between Mars, Uranus, and Saturn in the following days to the eclipse. And so, and there's a lot of mutable energy in the air right now so the fixed signs would be completely happy. So if you're a fixed, strong person, that's probably going to be a little more challenging for you.
Well, that's interesting, because over on Astrology Hub, Anne Ortley was saying the last eclipses was the one that got the cardinal signs starting to change things, or deciding to change things, I think is what she said. This eclipse is for the mutable signs to decide, and the Christmas eclipse is for the fixed signs to be dragged into the new world kicking and screaming.
Oh yeah, and probably this eclipse is going to give the initial kick to this fixed sign, so they understand what narrative is going to start being developed. So when the eclipses move to the pair of signs in Taurus and Scorpio, they really get it going. They really get the whole instability that the mutable signs are experiencing right now. I'll say I have mutable angles. It's been a ride.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm mutable sun, but for me, this is in my 12th house. Now, I am hoping that I've already had the effect of the eclipse, because there's a whole new field of study that has just opened up for me, which it's all magical stuff, and I probably won't be talking about it for another 3 years on the channel, but it's fascinating. I mean, the last lot of eclipses brought up, not the Gemini Sag, but the ones before, brought up me studying astrology in the first place. So
Right.
maybe I'm getting a new topic every time we have an eclipse series, hopefully. But scarily also, I noticed that for every Gemini Sag eclipse session, because it's like 3 sets of eclipses, really, isn't it? 3 eclipse seasons is the nodes in one sign. And for every Gemini Sag one, I've ended up moving town straight after them, from one side of the country to the other. So I'm expecting sort of Christmas or next spring, I'm probably moving again. I have no knowledge of this now, but we'll find out.
Right.
Any particular house that Gemini could be in where things could really get unnerving, or that people need to plan for? Or is it, there's an eclipse coming, sit still and just wait and see what happens?
Well, if it's in your 10th, honestly, if you're mutable angles, if you have Gemini in the 10th, Virgo risings mostly, if you have Gemini in the first, Gemini risings, and if that's going to be very clear for you already. You're probably going to know by, already for a long time whatever's been going on in that area and whatever's shifting and what are the circumstances surrounding that particular topic that you are moving on with. But if they're happening in your 7th and 4th houses, now that's a bit more unconscious. Even though they are pivotal houses, they are more unconscious pivots. They talk about things that are outside of us in a lot of detail. They talk about our home. They talk about the things that shape our circumstances that we develop more consciously in the 1st and 10th houses. So that could be a little tougher to consciously face. So 4th and 7th houses, I would say, to pay a little more careful attention.
Right. Okay. So on that note, I mean, I think this is going to be big. We was talking earlier about the actual total eclipse is supposed to last, what, 5 hours?
But yeah, I think this eclipse is going to last for 5 hours, yeah.
Now, I should have looked this up, but I'm not well versed enough to know if I'm sure that's longer than your average bear. You know,
well, yeah. It's just a very long eclipse. The moon, it depends a lot on the speed that the moon moves in. So you have to look at the daily pace of the moon and how fast it's moving to see how long the eclipse is going to last and how much it's covering of the sun. And
of course, it's because of being an annular eclipse, with the lunar eclipse having been a supermoon, an elliptical orbit. This means this annular eclipse, the moon's at the furthest part away from a point in its orbit away from Earth at the moment. So, I mean, that's, I'm not quite sure how to, I was going to go somewhere with that, but it's just fallen out of the back of my head. But 5 hours. So we can expect this one to have long-lasting effects.
Yes, we can expect them to have long-lasting effects because everything that, as above, so below, everything that happens there is an omen. So the longer an eclipse lasts, the bigger the ripple is going to be. It's like you're having localized earthquakes. You have smaller ones in the middle of the ocean, and they're going to cause some waves in the ocean, perhaps. But if you have a very big earthquake of those, tectonic plate kind of ones, you're going to have the tsunamis coming onto the shore, and those impacts of those waves are going to be much more visible and lasting, right? Same thing with eclipses. The longer the eclipse lasts, the longer the wave, the larger the wave of circumstances, and the more topics in your life they are going to get,
Okay, so good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
You have relieved some of my fears, because I can see that hopefully there can be good come out of this if everyone is taking responsibility to do what they can to steer that change. Let that change arrive, let it poke its head up and introduce itself to you, and then decide what you're going to do about it. Would you say that would be fair?
Yeah, this is no time to be just cowering in a corner. You have to take action. Life is actually demanding you to do so. So are you going to take the action, or are you going to just react and, face the consequences? That's the question right now for everyone. And
on that note, have you got anything else to add?
No. If you want to talk to me, if you want to have a reading or anything like that, I'm available on Instagram at David Fischer's Astrology, or David Fischer Astrology, actually. So, yeah.
And of course, you can contact both David and myself for readings through the Facebook page. There's a link to that down below. It's got its own inbox. So in the meantime, we'll be back to discuss the next new moon's a lot nicer, isn't it? Just like gentle. There's no more big nuclear bombs going off or anything like that. It's just a little bit, because I did hear someone say the other day that we have just passed through the quiet half of 2021.
Yes.
Everything else seems, we've had 2 Saturn-Uranus squares already. We've had all this big stuff, and now they're saying, oh, well, that's the quiet half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, should I start telling people to build their boats?
Yeah, we had all the things with 2020 last year, and the beginning of this year is just a continuation. Now we are going to see the true impacts of what the pandemic really changed in our society, because people are going to start, trying to live normal lives again in a lot of parts of the world. Many people are still in the pandemic problem, and that's also going to be an issue in the second semester that we're going to have to face. Like the more developed countries are going to have to face the choice of helping the undeveloped places in the world to, really go back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, assuming they can. Melbourne's back in lockdown at the moment, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
it's people are still trying to struggle to control this virus, but
Yeah.
rather than rather than end it on a bad note, there's lots of exciting astrology coming up in the rest of
Definitely.
is both on a personal and a global scale. So, as we say, there's contact details down below, and at some point, David, I'll remember to add your Instagram into the description down there. Type it me after the show. And yeah, so good luck, everybody. Don't, as David said, don't react. Observe the change, think about it, and then act. And I still want to finish with all praise to Rick Levine, but his catchphrase of think cosmically, act locally could not be more apropos than with this particular eclipse. So see you later, folks.
Take it easy.